The alien girl will never forget the moment a human's patience finally snapped. Commander Jackson Rice was known throughout the Galactic Defense Fleet for his legendary self-control. His piercing blue eyes and strong jawline might have made him look intimidating, but his calm demeanor had earned him respect across species. The way his combat armor hugged his muscular frame only added to his commanding presence, yet he never used it to intimidate. That's what made today's event so remarkable. Villia Severi watched him from her station on the bridge of the Stellar Vanguard, her golden eyes fixed on his broad shoulders as he reviewed mission reports. Her light green skin flushed a darker shade as she caught herself staring again. As his second-in-command, she'd worked alongside him for 3 standard cycles, and never once had she seen him lose his composure. The mixed-species crew had grown complacent. What started as small infractions, late mission reports, skipped maintenance checks, ignored protocols, had snowballed into a culture of negligence. They assumed the human commander would maintain his diplomatic approach forever. They were wrong. "Sir," Villia reported, her white hair cascading over her shoulders as she turned to face him. "Engineering Team Delta has postponed the critical reactor maintenance." Again, Jackson's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Third time this week?" "Fourth, sir." The bridge fell silent as Jackson stood, his 6'3" frame casting a shadow across the command console. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, "That's enough!" His voice thundered across the bridge, causing several crew members to jump. I've shown patience. I've shown understanding. But this ends now." Villia felt her breath catch in her throat. The raw power in his voice sent shivers down her spine. "Get me ship-wide comms," he growled. When the channel opened, his voice carried to every corner of the vessel. "This is Commander Rice. I've watched this crew deteriorate from one of the finest in the fleet to a disgrace. You've mistaken my patience for weakness. That ends today." He paced the bridge, his boots echoing against the metal deck. "Engineering Team Delta, report to the bridge immediately. Security Team Bravo, your combat drills are now mandatory and begin in 10 minutes. Navigation, I want those stellar calculations I requested yesterday on my desk in the next hour." Villia watched, transfixed, as he continued issuing orders. There was something magnetic about him in this moment. Raw, primal, yet completely in control. She'd never seen anything like it. "And one more thing," he added, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried more weight than his shouts. "The next person who tries to test my patience will find themselves on the first transport back to basic training. Am I clear?" The chorus of "Yes, sir," that echoed through the ship was immediate and unified. As Jackson turned off the comms, his eyes met Villia's. She felt heat rise to her cheeks again, but this time she didn't look away. Something had changed between them in that moment, a spark of recognition, of possibility. The rest of the shift passed in a blur of activity as the crew scrambled to make up for lost time. Villia found herself stealing glances at Jackson more often than usual, noting how his presence seemed different now. More intense. More human. As their shift ended, Jackson approached her station. "Lieutenant Severi, join me for a debrief." Her heart raced as she nodded. "Of course, Commander." The commander's private office felt different that evening. The usual professional atmosphere had shifted into something more intimate as Jackson gestured for Villia to take a seat. The soft ambient lighting cast shadows that accentuated his strong features, and Villia found herself studying the way his light brown hair, now loosened from its tie, fell past his shoulders. "I suppose I owe you an explanation for today's performance," Jackson said, his deep voice softer than before. He leaned against his desk, close enough that Villia could detect the subtle scent of his human pheromones, an intoxicating mixture her alien biology found irresistible. "You don't owe me anything, Commander," she replied, her golden eyes meeting his blue ones, "though I must admit it was impressive." A slight smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Impressive? That's not the word most would use. Terrifying, perhaps, or unprofessional. We're not most people, are we?" Villia leaned forward slightly, her snow-white hair cascading over one shoulder. "I've served with you long enough to know that outburst was calculated. You knew exactly what you were doing." Jackson's smile widened. "Perceptive as always, Lieutenant. Yes, I'd reached my limit, But I never truly lost control. Sometimes a commander needs to remind their crew why they're in charge. And is that what you're doing now? Reminding me who's in charge? The words left her mouth before she could stop them, carrying a hint of challenge that surprised even her. The temperature in the room seemed to rise as Jackson pushed off from his desk, taking a step closer. Are you questioning my authority, Lieutenant Sivari? Not questioning, she said, rising to stand before him. Admiring it. Your species fascinates me, Commander. The way you balance strength with restraint, passion with discipline. And what about your species, Villia? He dropped the formality of her rank, his voice taking on a deeper timbre. The Verdini are known for their directness in certain matters. Heat bloomed across her light green skin. We don't believe in denying our natural attractions. It's considered unhealthy. Natural attractions? Jackson moved closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Like the way you've been watching me today. You noticed? Villia's heart raced, but she held her ground. I thought I was being subtle. Nothing about you is subtle, Vilia. Your pupils dilate when you look at me. Your skin flushes a darker green. Your breathing changes. He reached out, his fingers barely brushing her arm. I may be human, but I'm trained to notice details. And what do those details tell you? She shivered at his touch, her alien physiology responding in ways she'd never experienced with her own kind. They tell me that whatever's happening between us isn't just professional anymore. His hand moved to her face, thumb tracing her jawline. They tell me that I'm not the only one who's been holding back. Velia leaned into his touch, her golden eyes half closed. Among my people, this would be the moment where we stop talking and start acting on our desires. Among humans, Jackson murmured, drawing her closer. This would be the moment where I remind you that I'm your commanding officer, and this could complicate things. And is that what you're going to do? She placed her hand on his chest, feeling his strong heartbeat through his uniform. Instead of answering, Jackson kissed her. It was unlike anything Velia had experienced. Human lips were warmer, more demanding than Verdini ones. She responded instinctively, matching his passion with her own. What followed was a revelation of differences and similarities between their species. Every touch, every moment of connection was a discovery. Their uniforms found their way to the floor as they explored each other with increasing urgency. Later, as they lay together on the office's small couch, Vilia traced patterns on Jackson's chest. I never knew humans could be so intense, he chuckled, running his fingers through her white hair. We're full of surprises, though I have to admit, I never expected this when I called you in for a debrief. No regrets? She propped herself up on an elbow to look at him. None, he said firmly, pulling her down for another kiss. Though we should probably discuss how to handle this professionally. My people have a saying, Vilia mused, the strongest partnerships are forged in both duty and desire. And perhaps this will make us better leaders. Perhaps, Jackson agreed, then grew serious. But we'll need to be careful. Not everyone will understand. Let them wonder, Vilia said, her golden eyes gleaming. I've never felt more alive than when you finally showed your true strength today. My people respect power, especially when it's wielded with purpose. The artificial dawn cycle aboard the Stellar Vanguard painted the quarters in soft amber hues as Vilia made her way to the bridge. Her uniform was perfectly pressed, her white hair immaculately arranged, but her golden eyes held a new sparkle that no amount of professional composure could hide. The previous night's memories danced through her mind. The way Jackson had held her, the heat of his skin against hers, the surprising gentleness beneath his commanding presence. Among her people, such passionate encounters were celebrated, seen as natural progressions of attraction and compatibility. But humans, she learned, had more complex views on such matters. The bridge doors slid open, and there he was, Commander Rice, every inch the professional leader. His light brown hair was neatly tied back, his blue eyes focused on the holographic display before him. Only Vilia noticed the slight softening of his expression when their gazes met. Lieutenant Sivari, he acknowledged, his voice carrying its usual authority. Status report. Engineering Team Delta completed the reactor maintenance overnight, sir, she reported, standing at parade rest. Efficiency readings are up 15%. Excellent. His lips twitched slightly. Amazing what proper motivation can accomplish. A junior officer approached with a datapad, and Velia watched as Jackson signed off on several reports. His movements were precise, controlled, so different from the passionate man who had explored her body hours before. The contrast sent a shiver down her spine. "Lieutenant, join me in reviewing the patrol schedules," he asked, gesturing toward the tactical station. As they worked side by side, maintaining professional distance, the air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Their fingers brushed as they manipulated the holographic displays, each touch sending sparks through Valia's nervous system. "Your species has remarkable self-control, Commander," she murmured, quiet enough that only he could hear. "Years of practice," he replied, his voice equally low, "though you're making it considerably more challenging than usual. Is that why you're standing exactly 1.3 meters away from me?" A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Protocol suggests a minimum distance of 1 meter between officers on duty. And the extra 0.3 meters? Safety margin." His eyes met hers briefly, full of hidden meaning. "I've learned I need it around you." Their quiet moment was interrupted by the arrival of Chief Engineer Pax, a towering Andromedian whose crystalline skin refracted the bridge lights. "Commander Lieutenant," he rumbled, "I must commend you both on yesterday's motivational tactics." Jackson straightened, professional mask firmly in place. "The crew needed a reminder of our standards, Chief." "Indeed." Pax's multifaceted eyes shifted between them. "Though I must say the change in your combined pheromone signatures is quite noticeable to those of us with enhanced olfactory capabilities." Vilia felt her skin darken with embarrassment, while Jackson maintained his composure. "Is there something specific you need to discuss, Chief?" "Merely offering my people's traditional blessing for new bonds," Pax said, his crystalline features arranging into what passed for a smile. "We Andromedians believe that leadership pairs who share both professional and personal connections create the most harmonious command structures." Before either could respond, Pax had moved on, leaving them in a bubble of awkward silence. "Well," Jackson said finally, "that's one way to handle discretion. Among my people, such connections are celebrated openly," Vilia offered. "It's seen as a sign of strength when leaders choose each other." "Humans are more complicated about these things," Jackson sighed, running a hand through his hair. "There are regulations, protocols." "Are you having second thoughts?" Vilia asked, her heart rate increasing. "No," he said firmly, his voice dropping to that commanding tone that made her knees weak. "But we need to be smart about this. The crew's respect is essential for maintaining order. Then we'll prove that we can be both professional leaders and—" She paused, searching for the right word. "Partners?" he suggested, his eyes softening. "Partners," she agreed, liking how the word felt on her tongue. The rest of their shift was an exercise in restraint. Every shared glance, every brief touch while reviewing reports carried the weight of their new understanding. Vilia found herself appreciating the human capacity for compartmentalization, the way Jackson could switch seamlessly between stern commander and the man who had whispered endearments against her skin. During their lunch break, taken separately to maintain appearances, Vilia received a message on her personal communicator. "My quarters, 2100 hours. We need to discuss proper protocols for our situation." Her response was simple. "Yes, sir." The day continued, filled with routine tasks and stolen moments. When their eyes met across the bridge, Vilia saw the same fire that had awakened in him yesterday, controlled now, but no less intense. She understood finally why humans were both feared and admired across the galaxy. Their ability to contain such passion, to channel it into productive force, was remarkable. The message arrived during the ship's night cycle, interrupting Jackson and Vilia's private moment in his quarters. The emergency communication light pulsed an urgent red as Admiral Henderson's hologram materialized in the room. "Commander Rice," the Admiral's stern face flickered slightly, "the Stellar Vanguard is being redirected to Proxima Station for an emergency diplomatic summit. The Arcturian Confederation is threatening to withdraw from the Alliance." Vilia, thankfully out of the hologram's view, quickly retrieved her uniform while Jackson maintained his professional demeanor. "Understood, Admiral. Our estimated arrival time?" 48 hours, and Rice. Henderson's expression tightened. "The Human Oversight Committee will be present. They're conducting their annual inspection of mixed-species command structures. I don't need to remind you how crucial this is. After the transmission ended, Jackson turned to Villia, his blue eyes troubled. This complicates things. The diplomatic mission or the inspection? Villia asked, fastening her uniform. Both. He ran a hand through his loose hair. The Oversight Committee is notoriously conservative about human-alien relations, and they're led by Admiral Blackwood. The same Blackwood who opposed the integration of alien officers into command positions? The very same. Jackson pulled her close, his warm hands settling on her waist. He'll be looking for any excuse to prove that humans and aliens can't work together effectively. Villia traced the strong line of his jaw. Then we'll prove him wrong. My people have a saying, the strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire. Your people have a lot of sayings, he chuckled, then grew serious. But this isn't just about us anymore. The entire concept of mixed-species crews could be at stake. The next 2 days were a whirlwind of preparation. The crew, still sharp from Jackson's recent display of authority, performed admirably. Villia found herself proudly noting how their efficiency ratings had improved, even as she and Jackson maintained a careful professional distance in public. Their nights, however, were different. In the privacy of their quarters, they explored their growing connection, learning each other's bodies and cultures. Villia discovered that humans had fascinating ways of expressing affection, while Jackson was intrigued by Verdani customs regarding intimate partnerships. As they approached Proxima Station, the massive space facility's crystalline spires glittering against the void, Jackson called a final briefing. The Arcturians are demanding more autonomy within the Alliance, he explained to his senior staff. Our job is to demonstrate that different species can work together effectively. Lieutenant Sivari will lead the cultural relations team. Villia stood straighter, feeling the weight of his trust. The Arcturians respect hierarchy and strength. They'll respond well to clear demonstrations of authority. Like the commander's recent performance? Chief Engineer Pax rumbled, his crystalline features glinting with amusement. Before anyone could respond, the station's docking control interrupted. Stellar Vanguard, this is Proxima Control. The Human Oversight Committee requests immediate boarding for preliminary inspection. Jackson's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Acknowledge control. We're ready to receive them. The inspection team, led by Admiral Blackwood, was everything Villia had feared. The Admiral's cold gray eyes seemed to find fault with every alien crew member they encountered. Interesting choice of uniform modifications, Commander Rice, Blackwood noted, eyeing Jackson's adapted combat armor. Rather primitive, wouldn't you say? Efficient, sir, Jackson replied evenly. It's proven effective in building trust with our non-human crew members. Has it indeed? Blackwood's gaze shifted to Villia. And your alien lieutenant? How does she feel about serving under human command? Villia met his gaze steadily. I serve with Commander Rice, sir. Not under him. Our partnership has proven highly effective. The moment the word partnership left her lips, she knew she'd made a mistake. Blackwood's eyes narrowed dangerously. Partnership, he repeated. An interesting choice of words, Lieutenant. Perhaps we should discuss your command structure in more detail. Privately, Jackson stepped forward, his presence suddenly filling the room. With respect, Admiral, any discussions about the ship's command structure will include both senior officers. We're about to enter crucial negotiations with the Arcturians. They'll expect to see a unified command team. The tension crackled between them until Blackwood finally nodded. Very well, Commander. But this discussion isn't over. The Proxima Station's diplomatic chamber was a marvel of interstellar architecture, its crystalline walls shifting colors to match the emotional resonance of its occupants. As Jackson and Villia entered alongside Admiral Blackwood, the walls pulsed with a deep purple, tension, anticipation, and something more. High Sovereign Nixus of the Arcturian Confederation rose from her seat, her iridescent scales catching the light. Unlike most of her species' warriors, she wore ceremonial robes that emphasized her regal bearing rather than battle armor. Commander Raksha, she greeted, her multifaceted eyes scanning the human officer before shifting to Villia. A knowing smile curved her metallic lips. And Lieutenant Sivari, your reputation precedes you both. Blackwood stepped forward. High Sovereign, we're here to discuss the Confederation's concerns about Alliance protocols. Indeed, Nixus interrupted smoothly, but first I must acknowledge what stands before me. She circled the command team, her movements fluid and predatory. How fascinating, a human-Verdani pair bond, yet you attempt to hide it. Why? The chamber fell silent. Jackson maintained his composure, but Vilia felt his energy shift, that familiar tension that had first drawn her to him. Our professional relationship is not relevant to these negotiations, Jackson stated firmly. On the contrary, Commander. Nixus's voice carried an ancient wisdom. Among my people, the strength of leadership is measured by the bonds between commanders. We recognize the power of such connections. She turned to Blackwood. Your human restrictions on interspecies relationships are primitive. The Admiral's face reddened. The Human Oversight Committee's regulations exist for good reason. Yes, Nixus cut in. Fear. Fear of what you don't understand. Fear of the power that comes when species truly unite. She gestured to Jackson and Vilia. Yet here stands living proof of what we could achieve together. Vilia stepped forward, her golden eyes bright. High Sovereign, while we appreciate your insight, we're here to discuss the Confederation's concerns. Are we? Nixus smiled. Perhaps my people's concerns stem from exactly this, the Alliance's refusal to embrace true integration. Commander Rice, when did you last lose your patience with your crew? Jackson's blue eyes narrowed. Recently, it was necessary to maintain discipline. And Lieutenant Savari's reaction? Vilia felt heat rise to her cheeks as Nixus's knowing gaze pierced her. The High Sovereign laughed softly. Yes. The moment a Verdani recognizes the raw power of human passion, it changes everything, doesn't it? Your species are naturally compatible. The human capacity for controlled fury matching perfectly with Verdani appreciation for strength and authority. This is completely inappropriate, Blackwood sputtered. We're here for diplomatic negotiations, not to discuss personal matters. Everything is personal, Admiral, Nixus declared. The Arcturian Confederation will remain in the Alliance on one condition. We demand the immediate revision of all regulations restricting interspecies relationships among command staff. The chamber's walls shifted to a deep red as Blackwood's anger peaked. You can't be serious. I am entirely serious. Nixus's voice carried the weight of centuries. The Stellar Vanguard's command team has demonstrated what we've long known. A true strength comes from unity, not separation. Their bond has created one of the most efficient crews in the fleet. Deny it all you wish, Admiral, but the evidence stands before you. Jackson moved closer to Vilia, their shoulders almost touching. High Sovereign, while we appreciate your support, this puts us in a difficult position. Does it? Nixus's scales rippled with amusement. Or does it finally free you to be what you already are? The Arcturians value truth above all, Commander. Your attempt to hide your connection insults us more than the connection itself. Vilia felt Jackson's resolve strengthen beside her. His voice, when he spoke, carried that same commanding tone that had first awakened her desire. Then let's speak truth, he declared. Lieutenant Sivari and I have developed a personal relationship. It hasn't compromised our command. It's enhanced it. Our crew's performance has improved. Our mission success rate is unmatched. If the Admiral wishes to relieve me of command for this, so be it. The walls of the chamber blazed gold. Truth acknowledged, power recognized. Well said, Commander, Nixus purred. Admiral Blackwood, your response will determine more than just the fate of two officers. It will show whether humanity is truly ready for its place among the stars. Admiral Blackwood stood rigid in Proxima Station's observation deck, staring out at the vast expanse of space. The diplomatic chamber's revelation had forced an unscheduled recess, but the real storm was brewing in the corridors of the Stellar Vanguard. Chief Engineer Pax's crystalline form materialized in the doorway. Admiral, you might want to see this. In the main hangar bay, the entire crew of the Stellar Vanguard had assembled. Humans, Verdani, Andromedians, and a dozen other species, standing shoulder to shoulder in perfect formation. At their heads stood Jackson and Vilia, their postures proud and unapologetic. What is the meaning of this? Blackwood demanded. Jackson stepped forward, his combat armor gleaming under the bay lights. Sir, the crew requested permission to make a statement. I granted it. A statement? The Admiral's voice dripped with skepticism. Medical Officer Chester, a human, stepped forward. Sir, we've served under Commander Rice and Lieutenant Sivari for 3 cycles. Their leadership has been exemplary. Their relationship has only strengthened our unity. Unity? Blackwood scoffed. You mean fraternization? No, sir, a Verdani engineer countered. We mean true understanding. The day the commander's patience finally broke, it showed us something profound about humans. Vilia's golden eyes met Blackwood's. It showed us that human strength isn't just in their ability to fight, but in their capacity to care enough to demand excellence. The Admiral's facade cracked slightly. You don't understand the complications, don't we? A soft voice interrupted. Admiral Henderson emerged from the shadows, his aged features set in determination. Tell them, Richard. Tell them about Elena. Blackwood's face paled. That's ancient history, James. Is it? Henderson challenged. Your Arcturian wife? The one you had to leave because of the same regulations you now enforce? The hangar fell silent. Blackwood's hands trembled slightly as he turned back to the viewport. Elena was, different, he whispered. She understood humans better than we understood ourselves. But the regulations were clear. Command staff couldn't... He broke off, composing himself. I chose duty over love. And you've been making everyone else make the same choice ever since, Henderson said gently. But look around you, Richard. Look at what you're destroying. Jackson moved closer to Vilia, their bodies aligned in perfect synchronization. Admiral, with respect, we're not asking permission to feel what we feel. We're showing you what's possible when we stop fighting our natural connections. Natural? Blackwood turned, his eyes haunted. Elena used to say the same thing. She said humans and Arcturians were naturally drawn to each other's strength. Like Verdani and humans, Vilia added softly, we're attracted to their passion, their controlled power. They remind us that strength can serve a higher purpose. The crew remained at attention, but their unity was palpable. Humans and aliens standing together, supporting their commanders without hesitation. Do you remember, Henderson pressed, what Elena said the day you left her? About humanity's greatest weakness? Blackwood's voice cracked. That we're so afraid of losing control that we control everything to death. And what happened when Commander Rice finally lost control? His crew became stronger, Vilia answered, because they saw that human passion, properly channeled, isn't weakness. It's power. The Admiral turned to face the assembled crew. And you all support this? This integration? We are integrated, sir, Pax rumbled. The only question is whether you'll continue to deny it. A message chimed. High Sovereign Nixus requesting their return. Blackwood stood straighter, his decision visible in his bearing. Commander Rice, Lieutenant Seavary, accompany me. The rest of you, dismiss, he paused. And, thank you. As they walked back to the diplomatic chamber, Blackwood spoke quietly. Elena would have loved this, you know. She always said humans would eventually learn to embrace their true nature. And what nature is that, sir? Jackson asked. The capacity to love beyond boundaries? Blackwood replied. To be strong enough to be vulnerable, to lose control just enough to gain something greater. The news spread through the Alliance fleet like a quantum ripple. Within days of the Stellar Vanguard's crew demonstration, similar displays of unity erupted across dozens of ships. The movement gained a name. The Rice Protocol, a call for recognition of natural bonds between species. Jackson watched the reports flood in from his quarters, where Vilia lay curled against him, her green skin glowing in the starlight. We've started something bigger than us, he mused, running his fingers through her white hair. Humans, she chuckled, tracing the contours of his chest. Always surprised by your own impact on the universe. The door chimed. Admiral Blackwood requesting entry. They quickly made themselves presentable, though the intimate energy between them remained palpable. Commander Lieutenant, Blackwood nodded as he entered. We have a situation. The Conservative Coalition is mobilizing against the proposed changes. They're calling for my resignation. Let them, a new voice declared. Admiral Henderson appeared on the holographic display. Richard, you're not alone in this fight. Half the Admiralty has been waiting for someone to take this stand. Blackwood's weathered face showed a hint of his old fire. The Coalition claims mixed-species relationships compromise command efficiency. We need proof otherwise? Then let's give them proof, Jackson suggested, his blue eyes lighting with that dangerous gleam Vilia had come to love. A demonstration of what truly integrated crews can achieve. What did you have in mind, Commander? The Rigel trials, Jackson said. Next week's combat exercises. Let the Stellar Vanguard compete against pure human crews. Valia straightened, understanding his strategy. The ultimate test of efficiency and coordination. It's risky, Blackwood warned. The Coalition will be watching for any mistake, any sign of weakness. Good, Jackson smiled, that confident expression that had first captured Valia's heart. Let them watch. Let them see what happens when we stop holding back. The preparation for the trials consumed the next week. The crew worked with renewed purpose, their recent stand having forged them into something even stronger. Jackson and Valia's command dynamic evolved, their personal connection enhancing their professional synchronization. During off hours, they explored the depths of their relationship, discovering new aspects of their compatibility. Valia found herself increasingly fascinated by the duality of human nature. How Jackson could shift from tender lover to commanding officer with such natural grace. The night before the trials, in the privacy of their quarters, she voiced her thoughts. You've changed how my people see humans, you know. That moment when your patience snapped, it showed us that human restraint isn't weakness. It's a choice. A choice we make every day, he agreed, pulling her closer. To control our strength, to channel it properly. And sometime, she whispered against his lips, to let it free. The Rigel trials began with a series of combat simulations. The Stellar Vanguard's mixed crew performed with unprecedented coordination. Humans and aliens moved as one unit, their different abilities complementing each other perfectly. From the observation deck, Blackwood watched with growing satisfaction as his former prejudices crumbled. The conservative coalition representatives shifted uncomfortably as the Vanguard's scores consistently topped the pure human crews. Remarkable efficiency, one coalition member muttered, but surely it's just coincidence. Coincidence, Blackwood interrupted. Watch their command team. On the tactical display, Jackson and Valia moved in perfect sync, their orders flowing seamlessly. Their personal connection translated into an almost telepathic professional awareness. This is what we've been fighting against, Blackwood addressed the coalition. This level of excellence? Because we're afraid of natural connections between species. The final test was a full battle simulation. The Vanguard faced 3 pure human crews simultaneously. As the exercise began, Jackson's voice carried across the command channel, strong and sure. Remember that day I lost my patience? He addressed his crew. Today we show them why. Not because we're angry, but because we care enough to demand excellence. From ourselves, from each other, from the entire alliance. What followed was a display of tactical brilliance that would be studied in academy courses for years to come. The Vanguard's mixed crew utilized their diverse abilities in ways the pure human crews never anticipated. The celebration aboard the Stellar Vanguard after their triumph in the Rigel trials lasted well into the artificial night cycle. Jackson and Valia observed from the upper deck of the recreation hall, his arm casually draped around her waist, her head resting against his shoulder. Your crew continues to surprise me, Commander. Admiral Henderson's hologram flickered to life beside them, which is why you've been chosen for a special assignment. Jackson straightened, instantly alert. Sir? The progenitor species has requested a meeting. The words hung in the air like charged particles. The progenitors, the mysterious first spacefaring race who had withdrawn from galactic affairs millennia ago. Their rare appearances usually heralded massive changes in interstellar politics. They've specifically requested the Stellar Vanguard, Henderson continued. More precisely, they requested the human whose patience broke barriers. Valia's golden eyes widened. They know about us. They know everything, Lieutenant. The question is, why do they care? The next morning, as they prepared for the mission, Jackson watched Valia adjust her uniform in their quarters. The way she moved, graceful yet powerful, still captivated him. Their night together had been particularly passionate, both of them riding the high of their recent victory. You're staring again, Commander, she teased, her green skin flushing darker under his gaze. Can you blame me? He moved behind her, his hands settling on her hips. My beautiful, brilliant second-in-command, who helped change the face of interspecies relations. She turned into his arms, pressing against his combat armor. Careful, Jackson. We have a mission briefing in 10 minutes. Then we have 9 minutes to... The ship's AI interrupted. Commander Rice, Lieutenant Sivari, Your presence is requested in the briefing room. The progenitor envoy has arrived early. They found the briefing room transformed. The air itself seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly presence. The progenitor representative, a being of pure energy contained within a humanoid form, pulsed with rainbow hues. "Commander Jackson Rice," the being's voice resonated directly in their minds. "Lieutenant Vilia Sivari, your union intrigues us." Jackson stepped forward, protective instincts flaring. "With respect, our personal relationship is exactly why you were chosen," the progenitor interrupted. "For eons, we have watched species struggle with integration. Humans, particularly, fascinated us with their contradictions, capable of both great restraint and explosive passion." Vilia moved to stand beside Jackson, their shoulders touching. "What do you want from us?" "We want you to represent the Alliance in the Grand Convergence." The room fell silent. The Grand Convergence, a mythical gathering of all spacefaring races, last held when the progenitors still walked among younger species. "Your display of human passion, tempered by alien understanding, has convinced us the time is right," the progenitor continued. "The moment your patient snapped, Commander, it created ripples we had not foreseen. It showed us that humans are ready." "Ready for what?" Jackson asked, though something in him already knew the answer. "To lead?" The being's form pulsed brighter. "The Alliance needs a species that understands both control and release, restraint and passion. The other races fear human volatility, yet are drawn to human strength. You two have shown how these apparent contradictions can become advantages." Vilia's hand found Jackson's, their fingers intertwining. "You want us to demonstrate this at the convergence?" "We want you to be yourselves," the progenitor corrected. "Let the gathered races see what we have seen. That true strength lies not in perfect control, but in knowing when to maintain it and when to let it break." Jackson felt Vilia's pulse quicken through their joined hands. "When does this convergence begin?" "Now." The progenitor's form expanded, filling the room with light. "Your crew will represent humanity's ability to unite with other species. Your relationship will show that differences can become strengths, and your command, both controlled and passionate, will show the galaxy why humans are ready for a larger role." As the light engulfed them, Jackson pulled Vilia closer. Together, her golden eyes met his blue ones, filled with the same fire that had ignited when he first lost his patience. Together. The Grand Convergence manifested as a vast crystalline structure floating in neutral space, its architecture defying known physics. Representatives from thousands of species filled its chambers, their varied forms creating a living tapestry of galactic diversity. Jackson stood at the center of the main chamber, his combat armor gleaming under the ethereal light. Vilia remained at his side, her white hair and green skin drawing admiring glances from some species, disapproving looks from others. The progenitor's voice echoed through the chamber. "The human Verdani pair will now face the challenge of unity." "Challenge?" Jackson's blue eyes narrowed. "You didn't mention any challenge." "Because it begins when patience ends," the being replied cryptically. From the assembled crowd, a Cranaxian warrior stepped forward. Nearly 9 feet tall, with metallic scales and multiple arms, he radiated ancient pride. "We reject this human-alien abomination," the warrior declared. "The Cranaxian Empire has maintained genetic purity for 10,000 years. We will not be led by those who pollute their bloodlines." Jackson felt his legendary patience beginning to fray. Beside him, Vilia tensed, recognizing the signs. "Careful," she whispered, though her golden eyes sparkled with anticipation. "Remember what happened last time you lost your temper?" "Oh, I remember," he murmured back, his voice dropping to that dangerous tone that never failed to send shivers down her spine. The Cranaxian continued his tirade. "The human claims to lead through unity, yet takes a lesser species to his bed? This is not strength, this is weakness." The chamber fell silent as Jackson stepped forward. His movement was fluid, predatory, reminiscent of the day his patience had first snapped. "Lesser species!" His voice carried through the chamber without raising it. "Lieutenant Sivari has more strength in her little finger than your entire empire has shown in millennia. You dare?" "Yes, I dare!" Now Jackson's voice rose, that familiar commanding tone that had first awakened Vilia's desire. "You speak of genetic purity, we speak of unity. You hide behind tradition, we forge new paths. You fear change. We embrace it. The Chronaxian launched forward, multiple arms reaching for weapons. But Jackson was faster, his combat training combining with natural human aggression. In seconds, the massive alien found himself on his knees, subdued by precisely applied force. This is human strength, Jackson declared to the assembled races. Not just in combat, but in knowing when to fight and when to love, when to maintain control and when to let it break. Vilia moved to stand beside him, her hand finding his. And this is Verdani wisdom, recognizing strength in all its forms, embracing it rather than fearing it. The progenitor's form pulsed with approval. The challenge of unity is not about combat. It is about standing together when faced with prejudice, about defending not just each other, but the principle of unity itself. The Chronaxian warrior, released from Jackson's hold, stood slowly. Your combat skills are impressive, human. Perhaps we have been too hasty in our judgments. Later, in their private chamber aboard the Stellar Vanguard, Vilia traced the lines of Jackson's face. You controlled your temper longer than I expected. He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. I've learned when losing control serves a purpose, though I seem to remember someone rather enjoying the last time I lost my patience. She agreed, pressing closer. It did lead to some interesting developments. Their passionate embrace was interrupted by another summons from the progenitor. More challenges awaited, tests of their commitment, their unity, their ability to lead by example. But as they prepared to return to the convergence, Jackson pulled Vilia close one last time. No matter what they throw at us, remember this. The moment my patience snapped wasn't just about anger. It was about caring enough to demand more. From my crew, from myself, and eventually from you. And now from the galaxy itself, she added, her golden eyes meeting his blue ones. Ready to lose your patience with a few more prejudiced species? His answering smile held that perfect blend of control and passion that had first drawn them together. With you by my side, always. The Chronaxian High Council chamber dwarfed even the Grand Convergence Hall. Jackson and Vilia stood before the assembled council, their presence marking the first time a human-alien pair had been granted such an honor. The Chronaxian warrior they had faced, now identified as Supreme Commander Thax, addressed the gathering. Our empire has stood apart for millennia, believing isolation preserved our strength. The human Commander Rice has shown us our error. True strength lies in unity, in the fusion of different powers. Jackson, his combat armor gleaming against the metallic backdrop, stood proud. His hand rested casually on the small of Vilia's back, a gesture that once would have scandalized the Chronaxians, but now drew appreciative murmurs. The Chronaxian Empire, Thax continued, proposes a new alliance. Not just with humans, but with all species willing to embrace true integration. We have witnessed the power that comes when human passion meets alien wisdom. Vilia stepped forward, her golden eyes bright. You speak of integration, yet until recently your people condemned such unions. Indeed. Thax's metallic scales shifted in what they now recognized as embarrassment. It took a human's explosive display of controlled power to make us understand. Commander Rice showed us that patience is not weakness, and its breaking is not failure. Both are tools of true leadership. The progenitor representative materialized in the chamber, its rainbow form pulsing with approval. This is the final test we hope to see. Not just tolerance, but true appreciation between species. Jackson addressed the council, his voice carrying that commanding tone that still sent shivers down Vilia's spine. The Stellar Vanguard stands ready to help forge these new bonds. Our crew has already proven what different species can achieve together. Your crew, Thax rumbled, and your personal union. Tell us, Lieutenant Sivari, what was it like witnessing the moment that changed everything? Valia's green skin flushed darker as she remembered. It was like watching a star go nova. Beautiful, terrifying, and impossible to ignore. Humans have a capacity for passion that most species fear, but when properly channeled, it becomes something magnificent. Something worth building a future upon, Jackson added, pulling her closer. The council chambers erupted in discussion, multiple species now joining in as news of the Chronaxian proposal spread through the convergence. The progenitor's form expanded, filling the room with shimmering light. This is what we have waited eons to see, the ancient being declared. The moment when species stop fearing their differences and start celebrating them, when human fire and alien wisdom create something greater than either alone. Later in their quarters aboard the Stellar Vanguard, Jackson and Villia celebrated their own private victory. Their passionate embrace was interrupted by a message from Admiral Blackwood. "The Alliance Council has approved the Chronaxian proposal," his hologram announced. "Furthermore, all restrictions on interspecies relationships have been officially lifted. You two have changed everything." After the Admiral's image faded, Villia turned to Jackson, her white hair cascading over her shoulders. "Did you ever imagine that day when your patience finally snapped, that it would lead to this?" He pulled her close, his blue eyes intense. "I knew it would change things between us. The rest..." He smiled that dangerous smile she loved. "The rest is just proof that sometimes losing control is the best thing that can happen." Speaking of losing control, she pressed against him, feeling his heart rate increase. The progenitor's final words echoed through the ship. "Let it be known across the galaxy, the age of separation is over. The human capacity for both restraint and passion, combined with the wisdom and strength of other species, will forge a new era." And it began with a moment of beautiful fury when patience gave way to possibility. As the announcement faded, Jackson and Villia sealed their legacy with a kiss that promised both fire and forever. Their story would be told across the stars. How a human's breaking point became a galaxy's breakthrough. How passion and patience danced together to create something new. And how love proved stronger than any barrier between species.